Hello again, thank you for joining me for another video. So I've been thinking about, I brought up the Terrence Howard, Joe Rogan podcast to watch. And usually before I watch something, I will scroll through the comments. And part of the reason why I was going to watch it was because it's been in my feed in so many other people's videos, titles of their videos, because everybody seems to have an opinion on it right now. So it just made me, look at how we keep getting kind of like pulled around central figures, central ideas, centralized concepts and information over and over. And then in that moment of circling a particular idea, we get completely divided. Some will be for it, some will be against it, and some won't want to have anything to do with it at all. And this just happens over and over again. Pick the subject, put it in the middle of us. So there's just a fundamental difference in the way certain people perceive reality, and it doesn't seem to matter what you put in front of us. Some people are open and they want to explore new information, and some people are very closed and they're just going to stay that way. And realistically, there's some validity and beauty to both ways of being that really doesn't get communicated very well. Some nuance is lost in the communication, obviously, and it's almost like this tug of war that is happening for the future and the direction of humanity and life. And it does seem like a waste of, I don't know, what could be happening. I think about, there's so many people in difficult situations, and I've always wondered like why we aren't able to put this much time, attention, and energy into figuring out ways to make, like just better choices as a global community. And part of that is just the distrust, because the same people that got us here want to decide where we go next, and it just that can't be. You have to, you're fired. It's you're fired moment. That's what needs to happen right now. You're fired. You failed. Let the next crew of thinkers have a whack at things, because I don't know. Like one of the comments I read, somebody said something like, "Oh, science is the reason why you have a phone, and science is the reason there's buildings and things along that line." And as if a person couldn't figure out how to build a shelter, or make shelter. Physics is part of what we are. We are created by, we are intrinsically one and inseparable from physics. So anyone who is able to look within themselves and deeply so can get a basic understanding of reality. Like, you don't have to write this stuff down in a book to be able to interact with it. We are it. And so to dehumanize people who think outside the box is to make it, is this whole like ism problem that we have, where there's a normal and everything outside of that, it is to be rejected. And you don't go forward and you don't add new ways of thinking, expressing, inventing. All of those things need some space to be held for people who think weird thoughts. And we have not gotten good at allowing people to think weird thoughts, because those weird thoughts add a bunch of them together, and it just might be the thing that sparks a creative newness that propels us into something better than what we're living right now. There's a lot of people suffering to the point of, the deaths of despair epidemic, and just like how many people on the planet are tortured by fear of war, tortured by fear of, starvation, tortured by fear of, any number of horrific things that no sentient being wants to know that another sentient being is experiencing these things. And so we try to dehumanize people, and it's like a defense mechanism, and we're using it in the wrong places. The places where we're using it, trying to defend like our own cognitive biases and structure of reality, and it's become so much a part of people's identities. And I don't think it's enough to like ask people to look at, consciousness expanding and things of that nature. I think like 10 years ago it was like, oh, we just kind of like get people to get off the religious bandwagon, and we can examine the nature of reality and come up with all these new cool things. And it isn't working. People are really entrenched in their own identities, and fundamentally to the point where if another person thinks something that they don't want to be true, then they dehumanize the person, and by that reinforce their own sense of worth and humanity. And it's a messed up thing to do. What I see is that there's a logos. Everything has a sense of itself. It's like the I am thing. I am a tree, and the tree recognizes all of its own, this part of it that is treeness, right? And that sense expands, infinitely in infinite directions. So it isn't that there is, you can describe a thing, but the thing you're describing does not define everything that you have not described. And that seems like an obvious statement, but we keep running up against this. If this is true, then all of this is not true, and we need to stop all of this is not truing everything. Say what you want about the thing that is true and repeatable, but understand that that does not infer anything about the things that you have not explored yet. And we don't know enough. And simultaneous to not knowing enough, we have been led to believe that shit that is not good for us is good for us because it made somebody money. Like, that's just the nature of freaking advertising. And we don't know to what degree and to what extent that has actually impacted how we view the material world. And that's the thing that people need to understand. The impact of things that have been set loose could be much larger than we realize. So hopefully that was some food for thought. Bottom line is, people aren't going to try to investigate the nature of reality and come up with new interesting ways of looking at things if what they're in for is ridicule and threats of death. Basically, that needs to stop, so that open creative thinkers who don't have the backing of a celebrity status are we don't want them shut down. We don't want them uninspired. We don't want them afraid to mention anything that isn't status quo. Maybe they don't go to school. Maybe they learn on their own and come up with something cool. And if the initial reaction to anyone who's questioning to the current narrative and mainstream ideas is critiqued in this way, then the newbies they're not going to come out of the woodwork.